Hi everyone, welcome to Here We Are, Brattleboro's community talk show. I'm Wendy O'Connell, and Here We Are is a show that is a weekly show. We have various people coming in from the community to talk about what they do, what they like to do, the kinds of things that really engage them. So here we are today with Peter Elwell, our town manager. Thank you, Peter, so much for coming on the show.
Hi, Wendy. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad to have you.
Glad to be here.
Sort of a last-minute decision we made today, but it's wonderful that you were available. And so we have lots of things to talk about. First of all, that you are, not only are you a native Vermonter, which is definitely a kudo. My daughter's one as well, and she really holds that in great esteem. But you're born and raised in Brattleboro. And your dad also was a town manager,
yes,
going
he was.
back a little bit, so you're in the family business as well.
So to speak.
So to speak. Yeah, okay. Well, let's speak about it.
Sure.
Yeah, give us a little rundown about what it's like and how you're doing.
Okay, sure. So being back in Brattleboro is a wonderful thing for me, and the opportunity for my family now to live here and experience it that way. We visited over many years, my children's entire lifetimes, and the entire time that my wife and I have been together. So Brattleboro has been a second home for them and always remained home for me. And us now being here and sinking some roots back into the community has just been really great for all of us. It does certainly have some special importance for me in terms of it being my childhood home and the fact that I came back to do the work that I do here in the community and with the community. You know, certainly brings a circle back around from having absorbed my dad doing that. I was born 2 years after my family moved to Brattleboro. My dad had previously been the town manager up in Essex Junction, and before that in Bethel. And they came here in 1960, and I was born in 62, and had my whole childhood here. So throughout that entire period, I never knew anything except you know, my dad being the town manager and our family being, you know, really deeply invested in the welfare of the community.
In the community, yes. And so your dad was was in Vermont. He was the town manager in many different places in Vermont.
Yes.
So not only does he have a feel for Brattleboro, but for the town itself. That must have been interesting.
Yeah, and it is interesting. That's another part of, you know, having come back now and being involved with this myself, involvement with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and the Vermont Town and City Management Association. These are organizations that didn't exist when he first got started, and he actually participated in the founding back in the 1960s. So it's kind of neat again, you know, full circle. I remember hearing about these organizations when I was young, and now I'm, you know, involved and grateful for them because they actually provide a real resource to managers and other public officials all around the state for as an opportunity for us to learn from each other and apply best practices in our own communities.
I'm going to, there's so many things to cover because I want to hear about your childhood again and everything, but the idea of these organizations that didn't exist before that you are now part of, and so there's a much wider range of community among the towns in Vermont. Is that true?
Yeah. So particularly in the League of Cities and Towns, the Town and City Management Association is a place where mostly town managers and a few other staff people come together, and that's helpful. It's useful. There's a broader array of folks who come together in the Vermont League of Cities and Towns meetings because that is actually the association of the municipalities rather than of the individual professionals. And so what we find there is when we're addressing issues, you know, Vermont has such a broad cross-section, everything from, you know, Burlington, it's obviously the most urban, and other aspects of the urban and suburban parts of Chittenden County, to places like Brattleboro and Bennington and Springfield and St. Johnsbury and Rutland that are their own centers of their regions, to that vast majority of communities that are very rural. And so when we come together as a group of municipalities to talk about things that are going on in the state, you get some really broad perspectives.
Oh, I bet you do. Yeah, I bet it's really interesting. So just to go back a little bit, so you did K through 12 in Brattleboro.
Yes.
And what was your elementary school?
Green Street School.
Green Street School. Yep. Okay. And then the middle school was there where the high school is. Right.
So it was actually junior high in those days.
Yes, it was junior high.
But it's in the same place as BAMS is today. And both BAMS and the high school have been, you know, really beautifully upgraded since the days when I was there.
Yes.
But,
plus the Career Center.
Absolutely. Right? The Career Center is much larger and has all kinds of resources going on there. So it's all great. I have no complaints at all about my public school education here. I thought it was a great launch for me and for my sisters who also went through the school system here. But I'm especially glad that the community has reinvested so substantially in the schools.
And so having kids back in the system must be pretty interesting for you.
Actually, my kids are not in the system.
Oh, they're not?
They're grown.
Oh, they are.
But I'm delighted to say that our daughter Charlotte, having graduated from college last spring, is actually finishing her student teaching at BAMS.
Oh,
She's
nice.
done it this fall, been a student teacher at BAMS. And,
oh, great.
So she's here in Vermont. I should be back here in Vermont because that's what feels right. But,
yes.
But she is now here in Vermont, having gone to school out in Minnesota. And getting ready to launch her own career. And our son's also still in college. He's a junior in college. So they've come here as adults.
I can't believe you have kids that old, first of all. It doesn't seem quite right. And so you went from BUHS to Middlebury?
Yes.
You stayed in Vermont?
I did, yep. Yeah, and in fact, you mentioned in the opening about being a native, and that's something that has always been really important to me. It was part of, certainly, obviously, an important part of growing up was just, sort of being immersed in Brattleboro and then in Middlebury and in Vermont things and Vermont issues. But then I left. After graduating from Middlebury in 1984, I went to graduate school down in Pennsylvania, at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. So I had 3 years of very urban experience there. And then most of my adult life has been in Florida with short stops there in Pennsylvania and also in New Jersey. The whole time that I was away, which was in total about 35 years away from Brattleboro and about 30 years away from Vermont, I carried with me this really strong sense of being a Vermonter and having Vermont values and the best sense of looking at things through a lens of community, groups of people relying on each other and solving things together. And so while I spent most of my career in Florida, the people that I spent it with all sort of knew that I was wearing Vermont on my sleeve the whole time. And so it was so neat that later in my career, I've had the opportunity now to come back and reinvest myself here, but also just really fully be home. I feel very grateful for that.
To re-land. I bet it was pretty interesting. And so you had, and you were town manager in each of these places?
I was assistant town manager initially for 12 years down in Palm Beach, Florida, and then I was township manager of Roxbury Township, New Jersey for 2 years, which is about an hour west of New York City, out by Lake Hopatcong, for those who know North Jersey.
Yes.
And then went back to Palm Beach, and I was the town manager there for 14 years.
So when you were in college, let's say, were you interested in doing this route of town managing?
Initially, I actually wanted to be a journalist covering the government. And there came a time during my 4 years at Middlebury when, based on some advice from a particular professor and some change in my own perspective, I decided to work in the government instead of cover the government.
Yeah, that is a big difference, isn't it? Not a huge leap, but but no, to be hands-on is really different. So when I'm going to ask you some, people who don't know things about what you're talking about questions.
Sure.
One of which is, if you're going to school to learn to be in local government, what kinds of things do you take in school? What are you studying?
So it's a combination of technical best practices. How do you go about looking at the right kinds of things, analyzing the costs of programs and the operation of programs in an appropriate manner to try to find the best bang for the buck for the taxpayers, and even a more focused technical body of knowledge around certain things that are not just skills based, but are actually about technology and how to use technology and that sort of thing. There was an element of it that was that highly technical, quantitative, but there was a significant element of it that was more about people, working with people, excuse me, supervising people, working with the community on different issues, how to engage with both those who had an obligation to be involved in certain kinds of public affairs and those who were only coming in out of interest. A lot of different nuances to doing the work that we do in the public sector, where a governmental administration degree, in some cases, the curriculum for that will look a lot like a business degree, but then a very heavy element of what makes it unique in the public sector.
Right.
Where all of our meetings are public and where the business that we're doing is the public's business.
Yes, yeah. Peter's used to being on BCTV. Maybe not on a one-to-one basis, but yeah, you'll see, I'm sure our viewers recognize Peter from select board meetings.
First and third Tuesday of every month.
There you go. You're there.
Yeah.
You're there. Yeah, I would think, again, because it's a public, you've got a public job, you sort of have many masters as well, right? There are many, it's one way of putting it, but you are dealing with so many different kinds of people and so many organizations and people with various interests.
Yes.
So does your staff kind of, do they kind of talk to people before people end up seeing you so they know what the issues are and then can give you information about them?
Sometimes it happens that way. I think it probably happens more routinely that way in larger places.
Right.
A lot of times I think because of the scale of our community, the people will come directly to me, and that's just great. What will often happen is somebody will come to me, and if it's just a matter of giving a quick answer so that somebody has the information they need, sometimes I know that, sometimes I need to rely on a staff person for that. If we're going to actually engage around an issue and try to find a better way to do something for the community, then what will happen is even if the person has come to me rather than to the staff person in the first instance, the working together on the solution is going to involve the direct staff who are responsible for that particular function, as well as me, as well as not only just the person who brought it to us, but likely some other people in the community too, to make sure that we've got full perspective about the impacts of what we might do.
Right, so you're accessible.
Yes, indeed.
You are.
We all are. So there's 130 of us on the town staff that are available to the public and interacting with the public every day. Wow. The 5 select board members, there's dozens of people who serve the community in volunteer committee member capacities. So there's a few hundred of us in town that are committed to doing the business of the community. And I don't know any one of those people who shies away from being engaged with our residents, our fellow residents.
That's so great. Not everybody obviously is in the municipal building.
That's correct. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Fewer of us now that the police department have moved.
Yes, right. That's right.
Up to Black Mountain Road.
Has that affected you at all? Has it affected the feel of the place?
It has affected the feel of the place. Operationally, there's been some impacts. It used to be a building that was open to the public 24/7. There was always dispatchers here in the building. Right. Now it's a building that's locked in the nighttime hours. So that's had some impact on the evening meetings, and we've had to set up some procedures around, making sure that the building is accessible when it needs to be accessible. But more what the impact has been here, and we hope it'll be just for the short term, is there's the vacant space down on the first floor where the police department functions is really noticeable in terms of the level of activity in the building having been really significantly reduced. We're in communication with the state of Vermont. We've actually signed, the state has and the town together have signed a letter of intent to have a long-term lease where the state will come in and we'll do a renovation of the building to accommodate state's needs and the town's needs to hopefully have the building, full of activity, full of governmental activity for a long time to come.
This is, I was reading about this in the paper. It's a big step, right?
It is a big step.
But it does also mean that the building will be renovated. And for anybody in the audience who's familiar with the municipal building, it's been through a few iterations. This used to be the high school.
Yes.
And if anyone hasn't come through the building, it's so worthwhile because not only has the Historical Society put up a lot of wonderful old photographs, but they do have a room up here, which is just sweet. And when you walk through the halls and you think, oh my God, this used to be all the high schoolers.
That's
and everybody was downtown, which I think is another asset, which of course is not tenable, in this day and age. But with the state coming in, so you could do kind of a West Wing, East Wing thing here, right?
Well, what we really like about the concept, and hopefully we'll be able to bring the concept to reality, is a few different things to really like about it. One is we already have kind of a concentration of governmental activities going on in this part of town here up on the north end of Main Street. So we have the courthouse and the state office building for the state's presence. We have the library and the municipal center for the town's presence. It makes really good sense, I think, to meet the state's additional needs for office space by doing it right here in this building on sort of this campus effect that creates. And being a place where the public knows, it's sort of a governmental center for the public to come and be involved in access services. So from that point of view, it works. It also, from a more selfish Brattleboro point of view, the state being a very dependable, long-term tenant and partner here in the building, means that we may have the opportunity to do a really substantial renovation of the building that is desperately needed, but will be expensive enough that it would be hard for the town to afford ourselves.
Right.
So by being able to do that together with the state and have the rental income from the state, we're in a position where we can make those needed upgrades.
So this could be very win-win.
Yeah, I think it will be.
Oh, good.
Yes.
That's good. If you think it will be with a really big smile, then we feel good too.
Good.
That's great. And I know that you have all kinds of things going on all the time. And right now, what's top of the list, or what's in this to-do list for you?
So right now, as we enter the wintertime, we're deep in the budget process. So there are some particular issues we continue to work on and address, both up at the select board level and certainly in day-to-day staff work. But the most visible and most significant issue we're addressing together at this time is the preparation of the budget for fiscal year 19, which will begin next July 1st.
Ouch, right?
We do the work now because the select board by the end of January has to make its final decisions on what it's going to be sending to the representative town meeting next March. And then it's actually the people of the community through the town meeting representatives who make the final decision on the annual budget. So staff began our budget work back in September, presented a budget on the 1st of November to the select board. From November through the end of January, we worked through that very public process of meeting, night after night, one Saturday this year. But mostly it's weeknight evenings, mostly it's Tuesday evenings, and looking ahead to when the final budget decisions are being made in January. We'll have the regular meetings in January would be on the 2nd and the 16th, but we're likely, we don't know for sure if we're going to need them, but we're likely to have special meetings just to address budget issues on January 9th and January 23rd. But by the 23rd, the decisions need to have been made by the select board about what's going to be in the recommended budget, so it can go into the town report and onto the warning and be ready for the representative town meeting.
Budgets never cease, do they?
No, and it's a really important process every year because it's what establishes the sort of roadmap for where we're headed. But there's a lot of times when it's more of a maintenance budget. So we're kind of steady as we go and making sure that we're properly funding things but not overfunding things. This year, it actually has an additional dynamic where there's been some change on the select board. There's been some fresh input from the community. And so through the course of the year, we had a number of different issues that we've been talking about really wanting to have town government be more active in addressing. But those don't come free. And so often as we were addressing these things over the months, we would say, yes, it would be really great if we could do that. We're going to need to address that at the time of the budget so that we can be weighing the different priorities and see what we can afford to do. Right now is when the decisions are being made about those priorities.
You are always thinking ahead, right? Always. To go back a little bit to you and your family here in town.
Sure.
Your wife is from Florida, from the South?
She is, originally.
How's she doing with Vermont
weather? She's doing great. She, it's nice because we visited Vermont a lot over the years since I was from here. My dad continued to live here all these years. So we've been back regularly to visit. My wife and my kids all loved Brattleboro as a place to get away to.
Yes.
And so Wendy and I actually thought over the years, we planned that we would do the reverse of what many people do. And instead of having the bulk of our lives up north and then retiring to Florida, we were actually going to have the bulk of our lives down to Florida and then retire back to New England.
I know.
It happened a little quicker than we had originally planned. And it happened more specifically back here to Brattleboro than we had thought would ever be possible. We actually were thinking, someplace in New England would be great, maybe all the way back to Vermont.
Oh, wow.
As it turned out, we made it all the way back to Brattleboro.
That's so interesting. So did you start thinking in this direction at some point, or did this just happen?
Yeah, so the moving here and coming here to be town manager was something that really grew out of the difficulties that the town had in its search for a new town manager when Barb Sondag left. So we really hadn't thought about coming to Brattleboro while we were still in our working years.
Yes.
But I saw the process unfold from afar. Our son was still in high school. Our daughter was off to college at that point, but Jonathan was still in high school, and we weren't prepared to make a move of this magnitude when he was a junior in high school. So we saw what was going on, and wished well for the community and kind of let that go, and we were going about our lives. It was a tough go for the town. There were several different times where
Yes.
the search process didn't work out to find the right candidate. And then there came a time, and I believe it was the third round, when there was somebody who had actually agreed to come and be the town manager.
Yeah.
He was the person who had been selected by the board, and this person had selected Brattleboro. And it was really unfortunate and very disappointing that that person at the very last minute decided not to come. And the way we learned about that was literally from the Brattleboro Reformer website. So from time to time over the years, I would just look occasionally at
the want ads.
not even that, really just to kind of go on the Reformer site, see what was happening back home. And it was something I didn't do with any kind of regularity. It was just from time to time. And I happened, by pure chance, I happened to look on the morning after that announcement, where the board had scheduled a special select board meeting for 5 o'clock in the evening. They were going to be introducing the new town manager to the community, and instead we're faced with having to say, gee, it's a little after 5 o'clock here, and about a half an hour ago the candidate told us they weren't going to come and be the town manager. And I was really angry about that. That made me feel not only disappointed for Brattleboro, and think it was unfortunate that situation was now going to continue on, but actually on some kind of a more personal level, I just thought that Brattleboro deserved better than that. And it got my mind to wandering, like, well, gee, Jonathan's a senior in high school now, and
there are little bubbles over your head, right?
So I talked to Wendy about it and said, gee, this looks like maybe with the turn of events up there, and what we've always thought about, this isn't the way we thought about it. It's sooner, and it's going to mean commitments that are more than just going back north to enjoy life there. But it feels like it might be right. And she said, yeah, I felt that way to her too. And so we agreed that we would look into it. Well,
what was that period of time?
So that was at the end of September. Within about a month or so, the process had wound on. The board had conducted its additional interviews. I was fortunate to be one of those, and was fortunate to be the person selected. So we made the commitment to come back, and in January of 2015, I came back. Jonathan was at that point in the middle of his senior year of high school, so he and Wendy stayed on. He graduated in May, and since June of 2015, we've all been here as a family.
All been here together. Wow. Were you a big winter sports person?
I wasn't, ironically. So one of the things that's really interesting about us all being here now, after all those years in Florida, is we really enjoy the change of seasons. That first rush of cold at the beginning of winter is,
I know.
is the first rush of cold. But in the total perspective of what the four seasons offer, with the variations throughout the year, and wearing the layers in order to stay warm in the winter, and just enjoying the changes as they occur, and then the warmth of the summer, we've just enjoyed every single bit of it.
Oh, that's so great.
And I'm really grateful to my wife and my kids for the fact that they actually have embraced it so well too.
No, that's a big deal. I was thinking of your wife and literally trying to acclimate, to a new climate. I mean, it's
well, and for all of us, that's a real thing in terms of blood thinning and blood thickening. So, anybody who moves to Florida that first couple of summers is especially challenging. And when you move up to this part of the world, the first couple of winters are challenging. But it actually, compared to, for my own experience and my own perspective on it, I think I was more irritated by winter as a child because I played basketball in the winter. I didn't do a lot of skiing or skating or anything. So the cold was just a nuisance. And as an adult, appreciating more the natural changes throughout the year.
That's interesting.
I'm really liking it.
Yeah, that's so great. And your dad must be pretty happy.
It's great. We never expected we would have this kind of time together at this stage of our lives.
Is he a mentor for you?
He's a personal mentor for me. It might surprise people to know how little we talk about town business, even now, even here in Brattleboro, but especially over the years when I was doing this work in Florida and he was living up here. We talk about family and experiences we were each having. We talked about the Red Sox and the Celtics and the
right.
Bruins.
And so he never tried to knuckle down and get you back here?
No, he never pushed it. And a few times over the years, dealing with something particularly gnarly, it's, oh man, this is what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
And we'd have a conversation about it, but very, very little shop talk over the years.
That's
Mostly
so
he's just been Dad, and it's been great.
Where do you go for vacation?
Actually, we haven't had a vacation in a while. With the kids, we like to do driving vacations a lot. And I have two sisters who live in Italy, so we have been fortunate to be over in Europe a couple of times.
That's a great place
spend
for
some time with them.
to be, yeah.
But yeah, we've actually gone to lots of different places and loved all of it. We never had a period of time when we said, we're not going to go because of the kids. We just pack everybody up and off we went. Yeah. And always had family out in the western part of the United States, out in California, and always had the family up here in New England and my sister in Delaware while we were living in Florida. So there's been good motivation to move around a lot and see a lot of the country.
Do you think you'll do winter in Florida at some point?
I don't. I think
done with Florida?
We'll visit Florida and friends down there and places that we enjoy being down there. We'll do that always.
Yes,
I don't envision living there again.
Yeah, that's great. Peter, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful.
It's been a pleasure.
I really appreciate you coming on, and we love having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank all of you in the audience for being with us today. It was wonderful to have you. And just to let you know, we really appreciate the feedback you've been giving us on the show, and continue. We love having you share what you think about the show, not only with us, but with your friends. We're here weekly. We're called Here We Are, and we are glad to be here. And thanks so much for being with us today.